Welcome back to Tethered and Whole, the podcast where we explore the real challenges of teaching and leading in schools and how to stay grounded and resilient through it all. I'm your host, Matthew Weld. Today I want to talk about a word that I hear constantly from educators: overwhelm. It comes up in new teacher orientations, staff meetings, and late-night text threads with colleagues. But here's the thing, guys. Overwhelm is not the same as burnout, and knowing the difference is critical if we want to stay tethered and whole in this profession. But first, a story. Ms. Alvarez used to love the sound of the school bell. It meant laughter, discovery for the kids, and new beginnings. Lately, though, each ring felt heavier, like a summons that she wasn't ready to face. Her district had adopted a new curriculum just weeks before school started, leaving her scrambling to relearn lessons that she'd taught for years. At the same time, half her students were still recovering from pandemic-related gaps in learning, summer setback, and parents demanding daily updates on their progress. She also carried 3 after-school committees, partly because no one volunteered and partly because she couldn't say no. And the strain showed in small ways at first. Papers left ungraded, a forgotten meeting. Then came the real symptoms. Her chest tightened before walking into class. She snapped at her own children for minor things, and her once steady voice trembled when speaking to colleagues. And sleep, that was once her refuge, was broken by endless mental to-do lists. One afternoon, she stood frozen at her desk as the students filed in, her lesson plans scattered and her mind blank. For the first time in 15 years, she couldn't start class. The bell had rung, but she had nothing left to give. Sound familiar? So let me tell you this. The root of the word overwhelm is whelm, an old word actually that means to cover or engulf completely. Add the prefix over on top of that, and you get, you just get a lot, right? It happens when we exceed our capacity, and our capacity is the max amount of mental, physical, and emotional demands that we can process. Overwhelm, it's everywhere today. Jobs get bigger, responsibilities pile on, and our instinct is to work harder and longer. Kids' lives are busier too. The complexity of our world has simply outpaced our brain's capacity to keep up. In my opinion, we've kind of brought it on ourselves. Before we get all weird about this, let me explain. We didn't do it intentionally. In fact, it was with the best of intentions. The vacuum cleaner was designed to make house cleaning more efficient, leaving more time for, other things. And what happened? Societal expectations of household cleanliness increased, diverting house cleaning time rather than lessening it. Likewise, everyone thought email was going to revolutionize communication and cut down on time writing notes and letters or making phone calls. What happened? Societal expectations on the level of communication rose, and email made everyone a lot more accessible, actually creating more burden rather than lessening it. And it's my fear that AI is going to do the same thing. It will cut out a lot of the repetitive work, which is great. But what will we replace that with? Rest? Time with families? That would be great, and I think that's the intention. But I think the same thing was likely to happen with AI that happened with the vacuum cleaner and with email. Expectations on output will just increase. Complexity of our lives will ratchet up another notch or 2 or 10 or 100, and our poor nervous system will struggle to keep up. Our capacity will be maxed out just that much faster. For some reason, we just can't accept working any less than we already do, even though our tasks are completed. For example, this last summer, my workload was less, so I thought, I have time. I'll start a new podcast. But seriously, guys, Overwhelm shows up in very real ways. Cognitively, it can look like forgetfulness, or racing thoughts, or decision fatigue. Sometimes it's what I call snail brain, when even small choices feel impossibly heavy. Emotionally, it makes us fragile, quicker to snap or to shut down, just like Ms. Alvarez. And it's not just in your head. Research backs this up. Cognitive load theory tells us that when incoming demands exceed our brain's working memory, performance and well-being both decline. For teachers who juggle constant multitasking, emotional labor, and shifting demands, that overload is practically built into the job. I was leading a resilience workshop recently, and one teacher admitted that I'm afraid this overwhelm will turn into burnout, and I'm only in my first year. That was my chance to share an important distinction, that overwhelm and burnout, they're related, but they are not the same thing. Overwhelm is temporary. It's that sudden storm. You're swamped by grading, blindsided by last-minute deadline, or thrown off by unexpected life changes. It feels like too much at once. But the key feature, it's temporary, it passes. Once supports are in place, or the moment passes, or the job gets done, the storm clears. Burnout, though, that's chronic. Burnout is erosion, and it happens at work. It develops slowly through prolonged stress, and it shows up, friends, as exhaustion, cynicism, and a loss of motivation. Maslach and Leiter, who studied burnout for decades, describe it as a three-part syndrome: exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal efficacy. In practice, this means a teacher may feel constantly exhausted, begin to see students as problems rather than as people, and question whether their own efforts actually matter at all. Burnout doesn't fade with a weekend off. It lingers, and it's strongly tied to teacher attrition. The teacher issue that we have with teachers filling jobs is a real problem in our society, and burnout is a main cause of that. So let's continue Ms. Alvarez's story. At first, Ms. Alvarez told herself things would get better after school started. But deadlines only multiplied, and soon even weekends and holidays, they didn't offer any relief. She didn't carve out time to recover. No boundaries with email, no saying no to extra duties, and no breaks for herself. And so her overwhelm hardened into burnout. In January, she arrived at school already exhausted, even though she'd just had 2 weeks off. Sipping coffee that no longer gave her energy. Her once colorful bulletin boards stayed bare, and she recycled old lesson plans without the spark that had once made them sing. Students noticed the difference. Her patience shortened, and her laughter became a rarity rather than a common occurrence. Colleagues began covering small tasks that she forgot, like submitting attendance or replying to parent notes. She withdrew from staff lunches, telling herself that she needed time to catch up. But in truth, that catch-up time was just sitting at her desk doing small, inconsequential tasks, because the thought of grading or planning or prepping was just too much. Next, the physical toll followed: tension headaches, lingering colds, and a gnawing fatigue that sleep no longer solved. Even her passion projects, the things that she loved to do, like gardening and reading and talking with her family, they sat untouched, stripped of joy. One day her principal asked in passing, "How are you holding up?" She smiled, of course, and she said, "Fine." But inside, she had crossed a quiet threshold, one that we really don't often see, and that is that she no longer believed that she could make a difference. That loss of hope, that was the deepest wound of all. So here's the picture. Overwhelm is the sudden storm that tests your shelter. Burnout, that's the slow erosion that eats away at your foundation. But the good news, they require different responses and they can be managed. Overwhelm can be managed with time management, prioritization, or simply asking for help. Oh, and accepting the help. Think of it as weathering the storm. You find cover, you wait it out, and then you adjust course. Burnout requires a deeper intervention. It requires rest, boundaries, systemic support, sometimes even professional help. You can't time manage your way out of burnout. It demands bigger changes. Here's a quick way to tell the difference. If stress fades once the situation eases, that's overwhelm. If the stress lingers even when the workload lightens, that may be burnout. So as you go through this week, check in with yourself. Am I in a storm or am I feeling erosion? Do I need to manage the moment or do I need to rebuild the foundation? So let's finish Ms. Alvarez's story. Burnout had left Ms. Alvarez hollow, but it was her body that finally forced her to pause. After a string of absences from migraines and exhaustion, her doctor told her, in plain words, "This is not sustainable. Something has to change." And for the first time, she admitted she couldn't do it all. She took a short leave and, with the help of her union rep and principal, she let go of 2 committee assignments. It felt uncomfortable for her, almost like failure, like she was letting people down. But she began to realize that stepping back was not a weakness. It was a way to survive. For Ms. Alvarez, recovery did not come quickly. She started with small acts, like walking outside for 10 minutes before school, turning her phone off for dinner, learning to say, "I can't take that on right now." She leaned on colleagues she trusted, sharing honestly how drained she had become. And those conversations sparked a quiet relief. She wasn't alone. Gradually, her energy returned. Students noticed a difference when she started weaving in little moments of humor again. Lesson planning still took effort, but she found herself thinking creatively instead of mechanically. And most importantly, Ms. Alvarez redefined success, not as doing everything for everyone, but as showing up whole and steady for her students. This wasn't a perfect cure, but it was a beginning, the first step back toward resilience. So, friends, naming the difference between overwhelm and burnout is powerful. It helps us respond with proportionate care and prevents the everyday storms of overwhelm from becoming the long-term erosion of burnout. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Tethered and Whole. If this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing it with a colleague who might need that reminder that overwhelm doesn't always mean burnout. And remember, friends, staying tethered and whole isn't about being perfect. It's about noticing where you are and choosing the next right step toward balance. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay tethered and whole.